As a fan of the Fantastic Four, it was truly hard to watch how hard Marvel sidelined them over the years because they didn't own the film rights to the characters, just like X-Men and Deadpool and a handful of other properties. As the MCU rose in popularity and the Avengers half of the Marvel Universe became more and more mainstream, the Fantastic Four and X-Men, who had a chokehold on the 90s and 2000s, stopped being invited to the table. Suddenly, the four main characters of the Marvel Universe stopped appearing with no ongoing comic for a few years. Written out of the universe during Secret Wars. No Fox-owned Marvel characters were allowed to appear in video game tie-ins for the Marvel Universe, their merchandise stopped being updated, and the comics even went so far as to disband the X-Men and then kill most of the world's mutants in favor of the Inhumans, who Marvel did own the film rights to. Two of the three biggest team comics under the Marvel branding became persona non grata during this weird X-Men and Fantastic Four prohibition era, which felt extremely petty as it was happening. But upon Disney's acquisition of the film studio 20th Century Fox, they finally had a deal in place to keep all of their character rights in-house under one corporate umbrella. The MCU could finally use mutants in the Fantastic Four. The only issue now was that they had already spent over a decade carefully establishing a world that no such characters existed in. If the Fantastic Four existed, I can guarantee they would have been mentioned at some point during the Infinity Saga. I guess it's the same situation as Peter 2 and Peter 3 coming from worlds with considerably less superheroes than Peter 1. But after a really shaky string of movies post-Avengers Endgame, Marvel Studios finally brought us their own take on the Fantastic Four, which is a film burdened by the baggage of its own franchise's infamous history, as well as being stacked atop the precarious Jenga that is the MCU after nearly 2 decades of films and shows across a fictional multiverse. Here is Disney's take on the first family of Marvel, FFM. Not as fun as MMF, but good enough, I suppose, is the phrase of the day for this film. Because First Steps, despite having a lot more going for it than its predecessors, feels like it's not quite there in so many aspects. There's so much to love here, but also an oddly incomplete feeling that creeps in as you watch it. So today we're going to talk about what works for First Steps, but also how it feels like there's something missing. Even in a world inspired by the 1960s, the Fantastic Four are pretty reliant on computers for their superheroing. Even their robot pal Herbie is instrumental to their success, which is why it'd be important to protect their data from supervillains up to no good. Which is why they should go with today's sponsor, ExpressVPN. A VPN, or virtual private network, is a tunnel between your device and the internet, designed to keep your online activity private and secure. And ExpressVPN excels at online privacy, securing your personal data, and unblocking geo-locked content worldwide. If you're like me and you live in the USA, ISPs can sell your browsing data to ad companies. And in the UK and Australia, ISPs are required to keep logs of the websites you visit, the apps you use, and the private conversations you have for 1 to 2 years. That means nothing you do online is truly private and can be accessed by malicious third parties with ease. But ExpressVPN blocks all digital eavesdropping and keeps you anonymous and secure. Hackers and data thieves won't be able to crack ExpressVPN's best-in-class encryption that would take a supercomputer billions of years to hack, which means your passwords, files, credit card details, and emails are safe and sound. ExpressVPN is also great for accessing unique libraries on streaming services in different regions, letting you view thousands of movies and shows with just a few simple clicks to change your server region. My wife can watch shows from Netflix in the Philippines, which gives her a big nostalgia blast of the country where she grew up. Recent laws will also block your access to certain content online based on your location, but ExpressVPN lets you defeat online censorship to access a free and open internet. Find out how you can get up to 4 extra months by clicking the link in the description box below. expressvpn.com/GodzillaMendoza. Now back to the video. 2025's Fantastic Four Step Up to the Streets is Marvel Studios' first adaptation of the titular team and a remake of 2007's Rise of the Cobra Surfer. The film finds the team as this world's premier superhero team, but also dealing with the stress of their own family growing as Mr. Fantastic and his wife, the Invisible Woman, become first-time parents to a mutant, but not really. The Thing is there too, I guess. Their potentially superpowered offspring catches the attention of Galactus, a planet-eating immortal space god who seeks to find a successor to his never-ending quest to consume. Galactus wants to transfer his immense power into baby Frankie to finally be at peace, or he'll destroy the Earth if he can't. Heck, he might just destroy it anyway. The Human Torch also has the hots for the chrome-colored alien servant to the Jack Kirby-hated Drawing Ears helmet monster. And Ben Grimm's girlfriend, whose name I forgot, is there too, I guess. So the dysfunctional superhero scientist family has to come up with a harebrained scheme to Wile E. Coyote away the flying purple planet eater. And the Mole Man is there too, I guess. Refreshingly, Fantastic Four: The First Steps is a completely standalone film with no ties to the continuity of the greater MCU. In fact, it doesn't even take place in the MCU at all. Instead, it's an alternate universe that is both modern and visually stylized like the 1960s. Kind of like Batman the Animated Series being set in the 1990s, but also having a noir 40s aesthetic. This is a great change of pace from so many Marvel films taking place in a contemporary setting, with a nearly uniform art design and aesthetic. The mainline universe goes to great lengths to make sure that everything has a visual continuity, making the set pieces, costumes, and overall style feel very samey across all of them. This story being set in Universe 828, named for Jack Kirby's birthday, allowed director Matt Shakman a lot of creative freedom. Not only could the production design look like nothing we've seen before in the Marvel Studios catalog, but they also didn't have to worry about fitting this movie in with a bloated continuity that's like 37 movies deep at this point. You don't need to worry about the Fantastic Four and their villains coexisting with the Avengers and Spider-Man and the Thunderbolts and the Defenders and the Disney Plus shows that are all terrible, and making excuses for why none of those characters show up to help fight Galactus. There aren't any intrusive cameos, so they can just get one more famous celebrity's floating head on the poster. Somehow, having the FF be the only superheroes of this world made me nostalgic for the olden days of superhero movies where that was the norm. I used to crave for these characters to be able to interact with each other on screen, but after 20 years of almost exclusively that, we've wrapped back around to wishing that they'd give each other some breathing room again. That freedom allows the film to give the FF a pre-established history instead of rehashing and belaboring the origin story for the fourth time in a row. They've been superheroes for a few years now, and they've pretty much gotten the hang of it. But they didn't go the Tom Holland Spider-Man path of just skipping the origin completely, not showing or saying anything about it, and then regretting it later when it became apparent that that was sabotaging the characterization and then walking it back. Plus, the production design for this movie is incredible. This is far and away the best looking Fantastic Four movie. The sets, wardrobe, and props all have this very unified 60s idea of the future that looks like the Jetsons. The retro-futuristic aesthetic really calls back to the team's roots. The MCU generally avoids adapting Stan, Steve, and Jack's storytelling beyond the Cliff Notes, but they can at least do more to capture the look of those comics, which has a distinct liveliness all its own. This is a way better visual tribute to the world of Jack Kirby than the previous attempt by Marvel Studios, Thor Ragnarok, which looked like a rained-on parking lot but had this symbol on the walls in the background here and there. I especially love the nod to Stan Lee and Jack Kirby during the scene where the surfer announces that we're boned. It's lucky for her that she came to deliver this speech and Times Square wasn't filled with super zombies. When I heard this film would be helmed by Matt Shakman, the director of WandaVision, I felt assured that the Fantastic Four would at least be given great art design and nostalgic retro-style visuals, even if the story might just turn into a big CGI punch fest at the end that loses me a little bit. Agatha all along was not nearly funny or catchy enough for that to be a meme. What the hell were you all thinking? Batting average for Fantastic Four casts is honestly pretty incredible. I think we're 4 for 4 on that across all of these movies. I don't even hate the 2015 cast, despite my criticisms of that movie, but you can go watch that discussion over here. Vanessa Kirby does a lot with a little as Sue Storm. She fits the character arguably the best of all the actresses cast as her through the years. She has the literal weight of the world on her shoulders as she's faced with the decision to save her newborn child, or the planet she's sworn to protect. And I really love her speech in the middle of the movie where she says she's not going to make that choice. Protecting her family and her home are one and the same. I suppose my biggest criticism is that she solves this moral quandary rather quickly. We could have probably given the characters more time to agonize over this prospect, so it'd be more impactful when she came to her own conclusion. I've heard some people read this speech as a metaphor for Marvel Studios begging audiences to trust them again after several box office disappointments. I don't really think I buy that theory, but the concept is at least funny. Previous iterations of the Invisible Woman in live action often forget that she's the most powerful member of the team, but this one finally got that right. They really let her shine in the third act, being the one who does the absolute most to defeat Galactus. No nosebleeds to show she's pushing her limits, she's shoving a literal god like he's a nerd into a locker. And it's a pretty standout moment for me in a movie that's admittedly really light on memorable action sequences. I also love that they did something new with her force field effects this time. Rather than the usual blue electrical energy stuff, It has this rainbowy effect because of the force fields distorting the light spectrum, much like her invisibility powers. And they do some creative stuff with her invisibility during the early half of the film that I thought was pretty neat. Joseph Quinn as Johnny Storm is just okay. I'm not a Stranger Things guy, but I did like him in the only good Quiet Place movie. Yeah, let's debate about that in the comments. I'll say he looks more like the character in the comics than any of the actors since Jay Underwood, but I wish he had a better haircut. I could tell they really toned down his vanity, sarcasm, womanizing, and overall aggression in this one to make him more likable. Being a loud, smug, self-absorbed celebrity dickhead that treats women badly is not in vogue currently. And in all honesty, sometimes the Chris Evans version did get on my nerves for being so cartoonishly arrogant and how poorly he treated Ben Grimm. Karma sure caught up to him.
Holy shit, girl, you crazy.
That's right, Wade.
So I can see why they dialed back Johnny's more obnoxious character traits, but that also left him sort of wanting for a purpose in the script if he wasn't there to be comic relief scumbag or like creating conflict in the group with his attitude. Instead, they try to lean on his intelligence a little more like the Michael B. Jordan Johnny, and have him actually contribute some brains to the team, too. All 4 of these schmucks were astronauts after all, you have to know something to get that job. So yeah, I mean, you know, he's not a total dumbass this time. His main role is to endear the human race to the Silver Surfer, so they give him this subplot about translating messages from her home planet to get through to her. I don't totally love this plot for him, but it works for just getting the script from A to B, and they had to find some way for the Silver Surfer to switch sides. You know, I do wonder if they could have still made Johnny the Surfer's connection point to humanity if they still used Nor and Rad. And history would say they were roommates.
And they were roommates.
Actually, being attracted to the Silver Surfer might still be a vanity thing. It's like having sex with a mirror so he can still see his favorite person the entire time. Having the texture of the FF's costumes look like the vertical lines drawn on Human Torch in the comics, so he'd be accurate in fire mode, was a really awesome and inspired creative choice. I love these costumes for having a unique aesthetic and looking more like a comfy sweater Star Trek uniform than a tactical vest. They're just such low-maintenance costumes that the cast can actually wear them a lot more, even in dialogue scenes, and just treat them like regular clothes instead of something they need to suit up and wear only for the action scenes. Technically, Sue has the best one. I'm not 100% sold on the concept of personalizing the suits for each member, but it doesn't really bother me how they executed it, so it's cool. I do wish Reed's shirt had the white collar too, he looks kinda weird without it. Apparently, if you play Joel in The Last of Us, you will get cast in way too many projects at once in your respective medium, to the point of becoming overexposed and the audience getting completely tired of you. I know it's cool to hate on Pedro Pascal because he's everywhere lately, but I still remember seeing him in so many small roles across TV and movies for decades before he got his big breaks in the late 2010s. He was just a small-time working actor trying to pay his bills like the rest of us, and he was in a lot of roles where he was just a guy with 2 lines in the background or something. He spent a long time working his way up to the level of popularity he has now, and I honestly really respect that. The same goes for, like, Walton Goggins, too. Pedro's poured a lot of blood and sweat into that career, and I can't blame him for just taking the damn work now that it's finally paying off for him.
Yes, ma'am.
I've genuinely been rooting for the guy, even if the internet's turned on him for getting too big. All that being said, I don't think he'd be my first choice for Reed Richards. I mean, he's certainly better than Mr. Explain Our Biggest Weakness to the Reality Warping Witch. Fucking blue spaghetti idiot. Here's some good news for you. We'll never see her dumb costume again, you stretchy fraud. But Pascal is okay as Reed. Perfectly serviceable. He really has playing a dad nailed down, if anything. He's an expert at playing numerous dads of varying skill levels of parenthood. He just doesn't really wow me as Reed, but he fits well enough that it doesn't feel totally wrong either. I would like to see him get more time as the character in a sequel, or his chemistry with Doctor Doom to really judge. As it is, I feel like he was cast because he's got a lot of marquee value. After 3 consecutive failed starts, this iteration of the franchise had a lot riding on it. Plus, Phase 12 or whatever hasn't been doing so hot, so they need to guarantee butts and seats. Pedro's one of the last real movie stars left that could afford them that assurance of success. At least, he was at the time they cast him. And in truth, there are definitely a lot of people who will go see stuff just because he's in it. Hollywood's a business, kids. We can't always get a random unknown actor to play Thor and then kill it so hard that it makes him an instant overnight star. Though I do wish stuff like that happened more often. But yeah, getting a big star to play Mr. Fantastic is a little distracting, because I don't really see the character, I just see famous actor Pedro Pascal, because I've already seen so many other roles with him. Sometimes getting a more unknown actor just helps you see the character a little bit more and not focus so much on the fact that this is a movie, but again, that doesn't make money. Getting him of all people reminds me of Mark Millar's terrible fan casts he made Nick Fury say in The Ultimates. Like Brad Pitt as Captain America or Johnny Depp as Iron Man. He's just picking the most famous guys he's aware of that have the same hair color as the character. I don't know who would be a better choice for Reed Richards that hasn't already played him at this point. I'm not a casting director. I just know it wasn't going to be John Krasinski. I really feel like the internet's only basis for fan casts for Reed Richards was just finding whoever had a beard. Apparently having a beard is his main personality trait in the same way that having a bandage on his nose one time was the only thing people knew about fucking Moon Knight. Mr. Fantastic's powers are unfortunately terribly utilized throughout this film. So much so that I don't even feel like doing a funny rhyme about it.
Without Batman, crime has no punchline.
Adding further insult to injury with them changing Miss Marvel's powers so as not to compete with Richards as the stretchy superhero. You ruined her shit just to not do anything with him? I just get the feeling the studio heads are worried that the stretchy powers would look too gross or uncanny, so they mandated characters to use them either sparingly or not at all. Matt Shakman himself said he didn't want the powers to appear cartoony. I don't know, you already committed to a comic-accurate Galactus, I think we could handle it. The movie has a literal cartoon of the Fantastic Four, why not lean into it? But alas, Reed only does, stretchy parkour. Nothing really visually exciting or memorable. He also uses his powers for 15 seconds across the film's entire running time. That's not very fantastic. Mr. Somewhat Remarkable on rare occasions when necessary. I know everyone was mad that Galactus grabbed him and stretched him out real bad, but it would probably hurt if you were not ready to do stretching and someone is forcing you to. Just because you're double jointed and you can bend your own arm backwards doesn't mean it feels good when someone else does it, I gotta give him a break. Hey, his costume ripped up in a cool way. Even with this film embracing the source material's visuals, there's still a little bit of that stink of worry that it's being too faithful would come across corny. So the Thing's catchphrase is still this dumb, coy little thing that they have to surf Dracula into the final battle, and I hear it and I just feel nothing.
It's clobbering time!
Flame on.
Hey Johnny, how many times did you say flame on in the entire movie? Oh, okay. We'll be just faithful enough to the comics for the fanboys to be on our side. Mostly just visual stuff, but we'll still give ourselves an out in case the general audience starts to think this is too nerdy. But then again, that's just all these movies lately, so I don't know if that's even a problem with just this one. The standout casting choice is, of course, Punisher's guy in the chair, Micro, who is a wonderful Ben Grimm. I know people want him to put on more of a gravelly voice as the character, but I don't mind it because his natural speaking voice just conveys such a warmth and reminds you of his inner humanity just as much as his unmutated blue eyes.
This Galactus, this Herald, they got no idea what they're up against.
He just has such a perfect loving uncle energy that you just want to give him a hug throughout this whole movie. He doesn't really do anything, but he's just so nice. Rather than going the animatronic costume route or the prosthetics and makeup path, the Thing is a fully CGI character in the first steps. Like Thanos or Gollum or Rocket or the Thing that has no dick.
Oh my god, where is it? Where'd she throw it? Oh god, oh god!
Is this what you're looking for?
Or a million other things lately. Taking a page from Iron Man 1, they helped the CG artists achieve a more realistic look for him by actually planning things out and having a practical version of him on set to match the textures and lighting. And then also, you can use it for blocking with the amount of space he'd take up since he's a big guy, and just generally having something for the other actors to look at to help with their performances. Keep that eye line focused. I'll take this approach 1,000 times over putting a tennis ball in front of them and then deciding what the design is deep during post-production and giving the VFX artists no visual reference to work with so it just looks like crap put on top of the frame. I'd say in our modern world dominated by CGI, if they weren't going to make the thing practical ever again, this is the ideal way to handle the character, and so far this is my favorite design for him across all 4 iterations. He just looks like he leapt right off an Alex Ross painting. And aside from some iffy moments where he's holding baby Franklin that look a little floaty, the effect mostly works. I believe he's there in the room with them. I just wish the story gave him more to actually do, as he's mostly just tagging along for the adventure and doesn't contribute much beyond punching whatever he was told to. Like, what's his character arc in this movie? He talks to Russian Doll twice. I really lament the loss of Alicia Masters as Ben's love interest, because Poker Face over here is incredibly boring and generic. God, Alicia just keeps getting shortchanged in multiple adaptations of the story, where she arguably saved the world by being such a good person. They keep taking her role of convincing the surfer to spare humanity and, like, giving it to one of the Storm siblings. I wonder if they changed up on her because they thought it was kind of shallow and depressing that the only person who could love Ben Grimm is someone who couldn't see what he looked like. Like, oh, he's so hideous that anyone who laid eyes on him couldn't possibly view him in a romantic light. That being said, Ben's love interest in the movie with AI Startup Lady is underdeveloped and doesn't really interest me at all. I do like that they recycled this set from Deadpool and Wolverine for the street they're on. That's some old Hollywood shit, like MJ and Peter Parker kissing on the same fire escape from Annie, Batman Returns, and the cover of Purple Rain. You know, like almost every train in old movies used to be the same train redressed over and over? It's so nice that this movie was made with sets and costumes and extras and objects that exist in real life. I like when movies feel like they were filmed by people, even with limited resources, which is why I love the 1994 version so much. At the very least, this one paid some real respect to my friends from the 94 film. I recently got to hang out with those guys in person when Alex Hyde White invited me to Pensacola, Florida. I had breakfast with director Oli Sassone and dinner with the cast, and then we went to a convention the next day. Rebecca Staub walked the floor with us and told us stories about her career, and then bought an Invisible Woman action figure that I showed her.
I'm gonna walk around like this, see if anybody knows.
Right. See if anyone notices.
Yeah, I'm gonna walk around like this.
I love those guys. I'm so proud of them for being in this movie, if only for a few short seconds each. Whatever flaws this movie may have, I'll always respect the decision to actually include the original Fantastic Four. So even though I'm saying a lot of criticisms here, I still want to extend my personal thanks to Matt Shackman and Kevin Feige and company for doing the right thing. Now release their movie! Just release the movie! Put it on Disney Plus right now! Sign the petition now! Like a lot of big budget studio movies in the last 10 years, you can really feel the edits on this one. First Steps at some point in production likely had a much more fully fleshed out first act that took more time to introduce the characters, build the world of Universe 828, and show us that the Fantastic Four already have a pre-established rogues gallery of villains. Our biggest evidence of this is John Malkovich as the Red Ghost in the first trailer, but apparently he was cut from the film entirely. The only hints of his presence are an offhanded reference from Reed and his Super 8 minions appearing during the opening montage. I really think he and a few of the other Fantastic Four villains mentioned in that scene were supposed to come into play in the third act against Galactus, but the only one they kept was Mole Man to explain why New York citizens weren't getting flattened by the 1,000 during this final fight. Man of Steel's greatest contribution to superhero cinema was forcing every other movie to have a rushed scene of people evacuating the city first, so we don't have to stress the heroes with the effort of, like, actually protecting civilians during combat. Even though that makes for better drama and is more exciting and heroic, and probably because big tentpole movies like this typically hate working with too many extras during action scenes, and tend to avoid it so they don't have to do too much VFX on top of such a rogue element. So they had a motivation to keep the Mole Man, even if it was just barely, but Red Ghost and the Super Apes and maybe some other characters were cut, which is a shame because I really like the idea of the Fantastic Four recruiting several of their enemies to help them defeat Galactus. It would still be in character for all of them because it would be in their best interest to prevent the planet from being obliterated. I could see the first act having been a setup for more of that plot point. Then again, I'm sure all of this was chopped down so the movie could just get started faster and didn't have 50 minutes of setup before the surfer arrived. I think they may have overcorrected though, because now the movie doesn't really have a first act, just a bunch of quick montages. Montage after montage, they're condensing so much material. It's a little too quick to get to the plot now. It's like the polar opposite of the 2015 and 2005 movies, which didn't have any plot at all until like the last 20 minutes. Mole Man has some kind of respect for Sue and agrees to help them if only for her, but that's just more stuff that was cut down so it's underdeveloped and we don't have time to care about it or think about it or anything. Not including the Watcher at any point in the production seems like a bit of a waste considering how accustomed general audiences seem to be towards cosmic characters like him now. I figured having him host the What If show on Disney Plus was them preparing for that character's live-action debut, and having him here in an adaptation of his most important storyline would be yet another great way to differentiate this movie from Rise of the Silver Surfer. But much like several other characters, it seems like he was left out to keep the plot simple and focused on the main 6 people in here. Which is also why I wouldn't have picked the coming of Galactus to be the first storyline for this iteration of the characters, because you have to introduce the main team and the Hungry Space God and the Silver Space Lady. That's just a lot on your plate for the first movie in a series. And as we can see with the Mole Man, the Thing, the Thing's girlfriend, and Galactus, the movie suffered pacing-wise for having too much to do and not enough time to do it. Yeah, Silver Surfer is here and hits a lot of the same story beats and even does a lot of the same aura farming moments, but is literally a different character this time. It was to my understanding that this was controversial because, why make Silver Surfer a woman? Now, if you're a gullible moron who can't think for yourself, the easy answer is that they changed Silver Surfer to be a woman to fit some kind of left-wing agenda to replace men in fiction with empowered female characters to sell more movie tickets to, the hippies, I guess. Some kind of blue-haired feminist stereotype that people conjure up in their minds to get angry at who doesn't actually exist. See, I sincerely doubt that a single person in the world was on the fence about seeing this movie until they saw that the Silver Surfer was a woman, and then it completely changed their mind and they decided they'd be there day one. Well, maybe foot fetishists. Why has our culture shifted in such a way that alien comic book characters can't be wearing shoes anymore? What the hell is going on? Is Superman in red toe shoes on the horizon? Can I die? If I were to speculate some actual reasons why they'd replace Norrin Radd with Shala Bal, I think chief among them would be to help differentiate this movie from Rise of the Silver Surfer, which is a different, modern, big-budget movie with big-name actors adapting the exact same storyline from the comics. Doing a faithful adaptation of Norrin in this movie would honestly look pretty identical to what the 2007 movie did with him visually and character-wise. Having Galactus actually be cool instead of a stupid cloud is not enough of a change to avoid just having this movie get endlessly compared to the previous one. Even with a better Galactus and all the stuff with Franklin, it would still feel a lot like we've seen this exact movie already. But they wanted to do Galactus in live action properly, and you can't do that story without the Herald working as Galactus' middleman and then ultimately helping defeat him in the end. But replacing Silver Surfer with a different person hits on the same idea that this coexists with the 2007 movie in the same messy cinematic multiverse. And it's just enough to push this movie over the edge of not feeling like an exact retread of the last time they did The Coming of Galactus. This is the same reason I think that Spider-Man movies generally try to avoid doing the same storyline twice. Like how Andrew Garfield's Green Goblin stuff had to be considerably different from Tobey Maguire's, or how the previous 2 Spider-Men haven't had any notable contact with Venom or the alien costume yet. It's hard not making these movies feel like they're just recycling plots if they do 2 adaptations of the same storyline, which is why most of them don't even try to adapt stories from the comics anyway, beyond the surface level. The other explanation I have for Shala Bal is that she also fits better with the movie's themes about parents sacrificing everything to give their children a better future, or motherhood, or a general anxiety about having kids in a world that feels unsafe or liable to be annihilated any minute. Yeah, parents in the 1960s probably were pretty nervous about having kids in that climate. That's reflected in the way a lot of folks are feeling right now about the world, with the existential threat of a climate collapse or the rise of normalizing fascist ideals in Western society, so it's an understandable and relatable theme. I want to have kids with my wife at some point, but goddamn, man, what am I bringing them into? I suppose my son will just be a Filipino version of Mad Max at this rate. In contrast, using Norrin for the 2007 film made sense because the movie is more about relationships. Sue and Reed were just getting married and trying to figure out what to do with the rest of their lives. Ben had found a comfortable relationship with Alicia Masters. Johnny was starting to feel insecure about being a perpetual bachelor and closeted homosexual. And Norrin was longing for his implied lost love, who was probably that universe's version of Shala Bal. The main through line of that movie was the sacrifices you have to be willing to make for the person you love most as a romantic partner. First Steps used Shia LaBeouf to fit their theme of parenthood by making her a mother who sacrificed her freedom to save her children from a world-ending catastrophe, which makes her a great foil to Sue and Reed, who are racked with the fear about having to make similar choices for Franklin's safety as the impending doom looms, choom. And her boss Galactus himself so effortlessly dunks on the 2007 version by really just being actually Galactus. Ralph Ineson's powerful, booming voice is so fitting for the character.
You carry the power to save your world. Inside her, the child.
Shove it up your ass, kick-ass. The purple helmet is way cooler than a cloud. There's a lot of bad pop culture opinions in comic books that are just Mark Miller using his characters as a mouthpiece. Galactus' costume is a super faithful translation of the original Kirby design. Or, the later design after he decided to give him pants and make it purple instead of Christmas colors. I know a lot of people tried to accuse this design of being MCU-ified, but I totally disagree. Having details and texture isn't the same as making it a tactical vest covered in lines and rectangles and layers and concept art puke. These details aren't just lines, they're techno-greebling like they used to do on miniature sci-fi spaceships. Having all these small mechanical details that are vague and hard to see from a distance helps create the illusion of depth on the prop, which makes it look bigger in scale than it actually is. This elevates the Galactus costume to the same scale as a starship. And yes, I said costume because it's actually practical. This is a real costume that they had Ralph Ineson wear on set so they could composite him into the CGI locations. That does so much to visually attach us to the character as a real and imposing physical entity. That way Galactus isn't an animated character on an animated background, there's a real person there, albeit digitally enhanced, that gives us something to latch onto visually. Plus it just adds more visual credibility than a giant special effect, so the Fantastic Four aren't literally the only real thing on screen in the third act. As a fan of giant monster movies, it's so nice to cut to tiny human actors and then cut to a guy in a costume with a special effect building next to him that makes him look giant. I like that. But I do feel like Galactus was also rushed, though. The film is in such a hurry to establish his desire to steal Franklin from the team that it feels like they just don't do enough to show us more about Galactus himself. We just get quick hand-waving dialogue about who he is, and what he does. But audience doesn't have a concept of how that looks unless they saw the other Galactus movie 20 years ago. I mean, I know how that process works because I'm a dork-ass nerd, but it would have been cool to see that visually adapted too. He's got to set up all those machines that suck away the planet's life force like giant mechanical ticks. And also, imagine how terrifying it would be to see him eating a planet with some kind of alien civilization on it. Since again, Marvel movies have gotten us very accustomed to aliens existing. Something about never visualizing the threat feels so toothless, and I feel like any competent screenplay would have included a scene like that, so it was probably just yet another idea on the cutting room floor. That's just really the biggest through line of this movie. It feels like there are really basic and important things from a screenwriting standpoint that are missing or rushed because the movie has to accomplish way too much in its runtime. Which again is why I think choosing this story to adapt for the MCU Fantastic Four's debut was a poor choice. Because the stakes are too high, the concepts are too big, and we don't really have the basics of the characters ironed out yet. I mean, sure, the average viewer has an idea about who all these characters are from pop culture references, the comics, or the previous movies, but we still don't get enough time to really get to know this version of them. There are a lot of nice, sentimental moments where the characters have a little heart-to-heart, but it's lacking in depth. Ben and Reed have so little time in this movie outside of one scene to really establish that they're best friends, so it's just another one of those things that the movie has to tell you verbally repeatedly. They insist these things about the characters instead of having the time to really show it. I think that rushed feeling of just jumping straight into the plot and the inherent chaos of saving the world from a purple giant leaves the characters feeling underdeveloped. They're all so close to being where they need to be, but they just don't get enough time. The movie is struggling so hard to balance screen time between the original four characters and the villains and side characters. Like, man, Mole Man is in this movie. Their relationships with each other feel undercooked, and the dynamic of the team as a whole doesn't get the attention it deserves because there's so much plot to get through. Even Silver Surfer's entire story arc just feels so rushed, and the movie forgets where she is for a while, only so her most crucial moment can just happen in the blink of an eye. Like, oh, I guess she saved us, yay! The moment is a little deflated by how fast it goes by, and that's really indicative about how the whole movie feels. It looks pretty. The costumes, set dressing, props, and character designs are all so on point, but it feels like it's all frosting with no cake underneath.
It's like covering a turd in ice cream sprinkles.
The characters are so in a hurry to get to the next plot point that they don't get time to be themselves, and it feels like the whole movie is just this breathless, endless montage. Even the scenes that are supposed to be kind of slow feel like they're too fast. There's too many characters to juggle, too many scenes to cut between, too much story to get to. So they have all this stuff that just doesn't feel like it's fully developed. This makes for a film that's visually interesting, but kind of vapid, because I'm really not all that attached to most of these characters. I like them because I like the idea of them from, like, everything else, but these versions of them really haven't won me over yet. The only solution I could see for this would be to make some kind of 4-hour-long self-indulgent director's cut, or to have just done what the other series did and have this storyline saved for the sequel. Rise of the Silver Surfer wasn't fighting this hard to give everyone equal screen time despite adapting the same story, because they already did the boring first movie that got all that stuff out of the way. Then they could devote more time to the Silver Surfer, who is in and of himself a really crazy concept. Then again, they also crammed Doom in for a more personified villain too, because they didn't want to commit to a Galactus beyond the basic concept of world goes boom. By the way, as an aside, the casting of Robert Downey Jr. as Dr. Doom is so transparently desperate and pathetic. That was a terrible choice that instantly ruined any hopes I have for them doing that character justice, and I have zero interest in watching him because it's so obviously a pandering publicity stunt that takes me right out of the movie. I want to like Fantastic Four First Steps, and I've watched it multiple times now with that in mind, but I mostly don't care about it. Even looking back at this script, I think all the most positive things I have to say about it are just how it looks nice, and the filmmaking techniques behind it. But the final product is just kind of hollow, like nothing about it was all that deeply affecting or memorable, which is a shame because that's what I was hoping for. Sure, this is the most visually polished film they've ever done with these characters, but the phrase,
"Here's to the future, my friend,"
holds way more thematic and emotional weight than anything this one has to offer. That movie was made for like 0.5% of the budget of this one. First Steps is certainly not bad. In fact, I think it might be the most well-made Fantastic Four movie we've ever had so far from a filmmaking and production perspective. But it's also maybe just like the least memorable. The characters feel undercooked, the story isn't too much of a rush to get from point A to B to C to D, and it really just hasn't left any kind of lasting impression on me. And I suspect that's how a lot of people felt about it. Came and went, and it was liked well enough, but it's not going to last in people's minds nearly as much as the arguably worse movies, because those had a lot more personality to them despite their numerous flaws. Fantastic Four: The First Steps is just so close to being amazing, but lands firmly in the category of just okay. Maybe that's all they really needed to get the franchise off the ground and have the team appear in more sequels, but I was hoping for more. The bar has been set so high by so many other comic movies in the last 20 years that I think the Fantastic Four really deserves better than just okay. I always get mad at YouTube for not putting my videos in the subscription box because people will comment, "Finally, Xavier uploads again after all these years," not knowing 3 other videos came out within the last month already. So maybe that stupid bell icon thing will help you remember I exist. If you want other ways to support the channel, you can always go hit up that Patreon for early videos and exclusive stuff because it's just $1. I'm not kidding, it's only $1. Isn't that cool? If just 5% of the people subscribed to me donated only $1 a month, I could make videos even faster and keep my house. You can also check out our merch on TeePublic, or just buy some of my random stuff on eBay. I have a pretty substantial collection of old toys that are still in the box in perfect condition, so go take a look in case you find something you like. And lastly, since this is a YouTube video and you probably play Fortnite, drop my creator code XavierGM next time you buy a silly dance or a cool character skin. Really helps me out. See you next time!